Hi everyone, it's me, Taehyung. Before we start, I just want to say thank you for being here with me. Whether you're watching this in your room, on your phone, or with your friends, I really appreciate that you took time out of your day to listen to my story. I know most people know me as V from BTS, the guy who smiles on stage, dances confidently, and always tries to make everyone laugh. But today, I want to speak as myself as Taehyung. Not as an idol, not as a celebrity, just as a human being who feels, who gets hurt, who learns, and who keeps trying. I hope while you listen, you don't judge me as someone perfect or someone strong all the time. I hope you listen to me the way you'd listen to someone you care about. Because I'm going to share something that I didn't plan to share with the world, a moment that surprised even me, a moment that happened on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, a moment that changed me more than I expected. I'm not telling this story to get sympathy or attention. I'm telling it because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe someone who smiles every day but cries when nobody is watching. Someone who feels like they have to be strong for everyone else but is slowly breaking inside. So, if you're here for entertainment, that's okay. But if you're here because you're curious about the real me, the person behind the cameras, behind the lights, behind the stage, then I hope what I'm about to say reaches your heart. Take a deep breath, sit comfortably, and let me take you with me into that night, the night I sat under the bright studio lights, trying to hold myself together, and Jimmy Fallon asked me a question that changed everything. I don't know why, but tonight feels different. Maybe because I'm finally ready to talk about something I've kept inside for too long. The moment I stepped on the set of The Tonight Show, under the bright lights, the cheering audience, and the cameras pointed at me, I should have felt excited and confident like I always do. But instead, I felt a heaviness in my chest, a pressure that had nothing to do with fame or expectations. It was something more personal, something raw, something I didn't think would ever come out on live television. When I saw Jimmy Fallon walking toward me, smiling with that warm and familiar energy, I tried to hide everything behind my usual soft smile. I told myself, Taehyung, don't let anyone see what you're holding inside. You're here to entertain, to make people laugh, to look happy. That's what idols are supposed to do, right? We smile even when we are breaking. We laugh even when we are tired. And we pretend we're okay even when we're not. But Jimmy looked at me differently that night. It was as if he could see something behind my eyes, something I didn't say, something I didn't want to say. We sat on the couch, and the show started like normal jokes, stories, teasing, laughter. The audience was loud and bright. Jimmy was doing what he does best, making everyone feel safe and comfortable. And for a few minutes, I almost forgot the pain I'd been living with. Almost. Then the conversation shifted. Jimmy asked a question so simple, but so sharp, it cut through every wall I'd built around myself. How have you really been, Tai? Not the idol version of you, but the real you. My heart stopped. I wasn't ready. I had spent months pretending everything was fine, months hiding a wound I didn't want anyone to see, months acting like the world inside me was calm when it was falling apart. I tried to answer in the safest way possible. I said, I'm good, just working hard, just focusing on music. And the audience clapped like they always do. But Jimmy didn't drop the question. He leaned in a little closer and spoke so quietly that for a moment it felt like there were no cameras, no lights, no fans, just me and him. Tai, sometimes people don't ask how you're really doing because they think you're too strong to break. I don't know why that sentence hit me so hard. Maybe because it was true, or maybe because I was tired of pretending to be unbreakable. Idols aren't superheroes. We're humans. We hurt. We struggle. We get lonely, yet we hide it because we don't want to disappoint anyone. Something inside me cracked that night. I took a breath and said something I never planned to say on television. I told the world that I had been going through a very difficult period. I didn't give details, but I didn't hide the truth either. I said I felt lost. I said I felt like I forgot how to breathe sometimes. I said I couldn't tell the people around me because I didn't want to be a burden to them. And the room got so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my chest. I didn't realize I was shaking until Jimmy reached out and held my hand. There was no script, no acting, no performance. Just two people having one of the most honest conversations of my life in front of millions. My voice broke when I said that the hardest part wasn't the pain itself, but the loneliness. The feeling that even though I was surrounded by people who loved me, nobody really knew what was happening inside me. And even if they did, I didn't want to make them worry. Jimmy's eyes started tearing up before mine did. He whispered, "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." I couldn't hold back after that. The tears I'd been holding for months finally fell. And the audience didn't scream or clap, they stayed silent, respecting that moment. The world was watching, but somehow it didn't matter anymore. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't smiling for the camera. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was just me. I thought I would feel embarrassed or weak, but I didn't. I felt relieved, as if finally letting someone see the truth inside me allowed me to breathe for the first time in months. I didn't expect Jimmy to cry too, but he did. And seeing him wipe his eyes so openly is something I will never forget. That moment became the most emotional moment in Tonight Show history. But for me, it was something even more important. It was the first time I let myself be human in front of the world. I didn't know then that what I said that night would change everything. I didn't know it would affect my relationships, my career, and the people I love. I didn't know it would lead to conversations I had been avoiding for too long. And I didn't know it would open old wounds I wasn't ready to face. But everything that happened after that night began because of the truth I spoke on that couch. And this is only the beginning. After the show ended, I walked backstage feeling like the air around me had changed. The lights, the audience, the applause, everything faded the moment I stepped away from the stage. I could still feel the warmth of Jimmy's hand when he held mine. I could still see the tears in his eyes. For a second, I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I had revealed too much, if I had shown a side of myself that I was supposed to keep hidden. Idols aren't meant to break in front of the world. But that night, I couldn't stop myself. As I walked down the hallway, crew members and staff smiled at me gently, not with excitement, but with understanding. It was a different kind of energy, softer, more human. Usually, after a show, I would laugh with the staff or joke with the band members backstage, but this time I just wanted silence. I wanted space to think. I wanted to breathe. I went into the dressing room, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in months, I sat down without forcing a smile. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to be V from BTS. I could just be Taehyung, a man who was tired and hurting and finally had the courage to say so. But the peace didn't last long. There was a soft knock on the door. When I looked up, I expected a manager or a staff member, maybe even Jimmy, but it wasn't any of them. It was someone I loved deeply, someone who knew me more than the world ever could, someone who was connected to every part of my life, both the bright parts and the darkest ones. It was Jimin. The moment our eyes met, I felt my chest tighten. There were countless emotions inside that stare: concern, sadness, confusion, and guilt. A guilt I knew was there, even if he had never said it out loud. He didn't speak right away, he just stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind him. Then he sat across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, like he always did when he was anxious. "You really said it," he whispered. His voice barely made sound. "You really told the world that you were hurting." I looked down, not sure what he wanted from me: comfort, explanation, or maybe distance. I didn't know anymore. He continued, "I watched you on the monitor the whole time, and when you started talking, I wanted to run to the stage, but I knew I couldn't. I knew it was your moment, and I didn't want to take that away from you." There was a silence between us that felt heavy but not cold. Even in silence, Jimin had a way of speaking straight into my heart. For a second, I wondered if he came to scold me, to say I shouldn't expose my emotions publicly. But instead, he said something I didn't expect. "I'm proud of you." Those words almost made me cry all over again. Hearing that from someone who knows your flaws, your weaknesses, and still says they're proud, that hits differently. But there was more behind his expression, a weight he was carrying too. I could see it in the way his fingers trembled slightly. So I asked him, "Why do you look like you're the one hurting?" He took a deep breath, and I could see he was struggling to find the right words. "Because I should have been there for you. I should have noticed. I should have asked how you really were before anyone else did." His voice cracked, and he ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "You were going through so much, and I didn't even see it. I thought you were just tired. I thought you just needed space. I thought giving you distance would help. I didn't realize it was hurting you." Every word he said hit me deeper, because a part of me had felt abandoned, not by the world, not by fans, but by the people I loved the most. And I hated myself for feeling that way. I didn't want to blame them. I didn't want to make them feel responsible for my pain. I never wanted Jimin to feel guilty. But the truth was, I did feel alone, even with the members I loved more than anything. I tried to comfort him, but he shook his head. "No, let me say this," he insisted. "I can't go back in time and fix what I didn't see, but I can be here now, not as a bandmate, not as V, not as Jimin from BTS, just as your brother. The kind of brother who listens, the kind of brother you deserve. Something inside me softened, but it hurt at the same time. Because even though his words were sincere, there was something missing, something unspoken. I could feel it. And then he said it. There's another reason I feel guilty. It's not just that I didn't notice your pain, it's because someone else did. Someone who shouldn't have had to notice before I did. I froze. I didn't need to ask who he meant. There was only one person he could be talking about. The one person whose relationship with me had been tense and strained for months. Someone I had been avoiding without ever talking about why. Jungkook. The moment Jimin said his name, I felt the room shift. All the emotions I had buried, confusion, anger, sadness, affection, everything rushed to the surface. Jimin looked away as if afraid to face the storm in my eyes. He knew something was wrong with you before any of us did, he whispered. He tried to talk to you. He tried to reach you, but you shut him out. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. Why are we talking about this now? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Because he's here, Jimin replied. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heartbeat became loud and fast inside my chest. Jimin stood up, walked toward the door, and paused with his hand on the handle. He didn't look back when he said, "You can ignore him if you want. You can walk away." But he came because he still cares. Even after everything, the door opened, and the last thing I saw before Jimin stepped out was the silhouette of someone I had been running from, someone who once knew me better than anyone. Jungkook. And suddenly, the emotional moment on the Tonight Show was no longer the hardest part of the night. The hardest part was just beginning. The door closed behind Jimin, and suddenly the room felt too small, too quiet, too heavy. I didn't look up right away, but I could feel him there standing a few steps away from me. His presence was familiar, almost painfully familiar. For months I had avoided it, and now it was impossible to escape. When I finally lifted my eyes, Jungkook was staring at me, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with a look I couldn't read, a mix of hurt, worry, fear, and something softer underneath, something that made my chest ache. Neither of us spoke at first. It was strange. We used to talk without thinking. We used to joke, laugh, fight, shout, tease, share dreams, share fears without hesitation. He used to be the easiest person in the world to talk to. And now, he was the hardest. He took a small step closer. Tai, he said quietly. Just my name, no judgment, no question. And somehow, that hurt more than anything he could have said. I kept my voice steady. When I answered, "You didn't have to come." I didn't know whether I was pushing him away or pulling him closer with those words, but it was the only thing I could say. He walked in and closed the distance between us until he was close enough that I could see the redness in his eyes. Had he been crying too? I didn't want to think about that. It made everything more painful. "I did," he replied. "I had to." I looked away. I didn't trust myself to face him for too long. "Why?" I whispered, even though I already knew the reason. He let out a shaky breath. "Because you're hurting, and I can't pretend I don't see it anymore." His words echoed inside me. They should have brought comfort. Instead, they opened the wound deeper. "I didn't want you to see it," I said trying to keep my voice from breaking. I didn't want anyone to see it. He shook his head. No, Tae, you didn't want the world to see it, but I'm not the world. Those words cut straight through every wall I had built. I didn't know how to respond. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say, 1,000 things I had kept inside. I wanted to tell him how angry I was, how confused I was, how abandoned I felt, how desperately I wanted him near, and how scared I was of needing him too much. But none of those things came out. Instead, I said, "It's complicated." He sat down across from me, his eyes never leaving mine. "Then explain it to me. Let me in. Let me understand. I'm right here." The truth is, I wasn't ready. But I was tired. Tired of running. Tired of pretending. Tired of holding everything inside until it destroyed me. So I told him the truth. It wasn't that I didn't want you near. It's that you were too close. He froze, not physically, but emotionally. I saw it in his face. He wasn't expecting that answer, neither was I. But once the words started coming out, I couldn't hold them back. When I was going through everything, I said, everyone saw the version of me I showed them, the calm version, the strong version, the smiling version. But you saw something else. You saw what was really happening. You saw that something was wrong, and that scared me. He looked confused, but not angry. Why would that scare you? Because if you saw the real me, I said, then you could break the walls I built to protect myself, and I wasn't ready to fall apart in front of you. Jungkook leaned back slowly, like he was processing every word. So you pushed me away because I cared too much? I shook my head. No, I pushed you away because I cared too much. The silence that followed was heavy but not cold. It felt like two hearts trying to understand each other from across a distance neither of us had meant to create. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair. You know, every time I tried to talk to you and you pulled back, it hurt. I kept thinking I did something wrong. I kept thinking I wasn't enough, not good enough, not supportive enough, not close enough. Hearing that made my heart ache in a different way. I never wanted him to feel that. I never wanted him to doubt himself. You didn't do anything wrong, I said immediately. You were the only one who noticed. You were the only one trying to help, and that was the problem. He looked like he was trying to understand. Why is that a problem, Tai? Why is it a bad thing to care? Because if I let you get too close, I knew everything I was holding inside was going to come out. And I wasn't ready to break in front of you. I wasn't ready for you to see the weakest version of me. His eyes softened and he shook his head slowly. The weakest version of you isn't weak at all. It's just human. I looked down. My hands were shaking. I didn't feel human anymore. I felt like a burden. And then Jungkook said something I will never forget. You're not a burden. You're someone I love. And people you love aren't heavy. You carry them because you want to. The room fell silent after that. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Because for the first time in a very long time, I felt safe. I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel alone. I felt cared for. But that moment didn't erase the months of distance between us. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't erase the questions. And there were many questions. Questions about why I shut him out. Questions about why I felt trapped. between needing him and fearing him. Questions about how our relationship had gotten so complicated when it used to be so easy. Jungkook could feel there was more a truth I still wasn't saying, and he asked me something I wasn't prepared for. What are you really afraid of, Taehyung? The answer was right there, inside my heart, but saying it out loud would change everything. It would make everything real, the feelings, the distance, the pain, the bond between us, the thing neither of us ever talked about. If I spoke the truth, nothing would be the same again. I took a deep breath. My chest felt tight as if the world was waiting for my answer. What am I afraid of? I repeated, but I didn't get the chance to answer because right then someone knocked on the door from the hallway. We both froze. The truth remained trapped between us, burning, urgent, and dangerous. And the night was far from over. The knock on the door pulled both of us back into reality. It was strange. Just minutes ago, I had been on national television in front of millions of people talking about the most vulnerable part of myself. Yet, somehow, this room, this conversation with Jungkook felt even more intense than what happened on camera. The knock broke the moment, but it didn't erase what was hanging between us. I didn't say anything. Neither did Jungkook. We just stared at the door like we were both afraid of whatever or whoever was waiting on the other side. Another knock came, more insistent this time. Taehyung? Jungkook? Are you both inside? It was my manager's voice. Jungkook looked at me as if asking silently whether he should answer or not. I didn't move. My manager knocked again. Taehyung, the producers are waiting for your closing interview footage. We don't have much time. Every part of me wanted to shout, not now. Not when I'm finally starting to break open. But my world never stops, even when I do. I stood up slowly. Jungkook rose with me, staying close like he wasn't willing to let the moment disappear. I opened the door just enough to show my face. My manager looked relieved, but when he saw my eyes still red, still raw, his expression quickly shifted from professional to concerned. Are you okay? He asked softly. I forced a small smile. I'm fine. He didn't believe me, but he respected the lie. You need to go back on set for a short closing message. 2 minutes only. Cameras go live again in 10. Before I could respond, he added, Jungkook, you're not needed outside. You can stay here if you want. Jungkook nodded gently, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. There was a message in his stare. We're not done. Don't disappear again. I stepped into the hallway, and as the door closed behind me, I felt something in my chest twist painfully, like I was walking away from something I'd been needing for a long time. The producers walked me back toward the stage. The lights felt brighter than before, almost blinding. Everyone was moving quickly, adjusting microphones, cameras, positions, everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Part of my heart was still in that dressing room, sitting in front of Jungkook, with the truth burning at the back of my throat. When I walked onto the stage again, Jimmy was already there. His eyes were still a little red too. He stood up when he saw me and gave me a quiet smile. Not the smile of a talk show host, but the smile of someone who genuinely cared. You okay to do this? He whispered. I nodded. Yeah, I need to. We sat down and the cameras started rolling. The audience cheered again louder this time, but different. There was warmth in it, empathy. People weren't looking at me like an idol anymore. They were looking at me like a human being. Jimmy introduced the closing segment, but instead of the usual jokes and light questions, he asked me something beautifully simple. If there's one thing you want to say to anyone out there who might be feeling what you've been feeling, what would it be? I inhaled slowly. The studio fell quiet again, the same way it had earlier. The world waited. I spoke from a place I had never shared before. I want people to know that it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to carry everything alone. You don't have to pretend to be strong every day. I spent so much time thinking I had to fight everything by myself because I didn't want to burden anyone. But pain isn't a burden, it's a signal. It's asking for help, and sometimes healing starts when you let people in. Somewhere in the audience, someone sniffled. I didn't look to see who, but I felt the energy shifting. The cameras weren't recording a performance anymore. They were recording a truth. Jimmy squeezed my shoulder before the cameras cut. The show ended, the lights went down, and the world, the one inside that studio, exhaled. When I walked backstage again, there were crew members wiping their eyes. Some hugged me, some whispered thank you, like I had done something meaningful. I didn't know how to react. I wasn't used to being comforted. I didn't know what to do when people wanted to hold me instead of watching me perform. But even with all of that, the support, the warmth, the relief, one thing pulled my attention over everything else. The dressing room door down the hallway. Jungkook was behind it, waiting. And even though I was scared, even though I didn't know what truths were waiting to be spoken, my feet started walking toward it. Every step felt heavier, not because I didn't want to open the door, but because I knew that once I walked in, there would be no more running, no more hiding, no more pretending that distance was safer than closeness. When I turned the doorknob and stepped inside, Jungkook stood up instantly like he'd been on edge the whole time I was gone. His eyes searched mine right away. And he didn't waste a second before asking, "Can we finish the conversation?" The fear inside me was loud, but my desire for honesty, for connection was louder. "Yes," I said, "we need to." I sat down across from him again. The tension was thick, but so was the bond. He looked at me with that same question, still waiting in his eyes. "What are you really afraid of, Taehyung?" This time, there was no interruption, no knock, no escape. Just the truth I'd been running from for months. I took a deep breath, and this time, I answered. Jimmy leaned closer, his voice suddenly quiet, like he didn't want anyone else in the studio to hear. He said, "Taehyung, what's the pain you've been hiding the longest?" In that exact moment, every sound in the room disappeared. The applause faded. The cameras didn't matter. Even the audience felt like they disappeared. I could only hear those words echoing inside my head. The pain you've been hiding the longest. I didn't expect that question. That wasn't part of the script. It wasn't in the brief that the staff gave me earlier. I looked at Jimmy and all I could think was, should I really say this on live television? I hesitated, but then I remembered why I agreed to do the show in the first place. I wanted to stop running away. I wanted to stop pretending I was okay, so I decided to speak. I said slowly. The biggest pain I've been hiding is that sometimes I feel like the world loves me, but the real me has no one. When those words left my mouth, I felt naked, exposed, terrified. I could hear a soft gasp from the audience. I could see the camera operator flinch, like he wasn't prepared for that statement. But I kept going, because once I started, I couldn't stop. I told Jimmy how I always tried to look strong, look stable, look cool for the cameras. But sometimes, after concerts, when the lights turned off and the cheers faded, I would go back to my hotel room, sit in silence, and ask myself if the world would still love me if I wasn't V of BTS, if I was just Kim Taehyung, an ordinary guy who makes mistakes, who feels lonely, who misses home, who wants to be loved, not for fame, but for who he truly is. My voice trembled a little, and I didn't try to hide it. I talked about how fame can be a blessing, but also a cage. I talked about how I missed moments I never had, like carefree high school memories, or walking around outside without people secretly recording me, or building friendships that weren't based on expectations or status. I said, sometimes I feel like people are cheering for a version of me I created to survive, not the version of me that actually exists. I wasn't angry, I wasn't dramatic. I was just honest, maybe too honest. Jimmy didn't interrupt. He didn't even move. He listened the way a real friend listens, without judgment, without impatience, without pretending. And then he said something that no interviewer has ever said to me. He told me, "You deserve to be loved for who you are when no one is watching." Hearing that from someone who didn't owe me anything, it hit different. I didn't respond right away. I dropped my gaze because I could feel my eyes start to sting again. I didn't want to cry on national television. I didn't want to look weak. But Jimmy looked at me and said, "It's okay, Taehyung. You don't have to be strong right now." That one sentence broke me because I have spent so many years believing I always needed to be strong for the members, for ARMY, for my family, for the world, and suddenly someone was giving me permission to breathe, to collapse, to let go just for a moment. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It felt safe, it felt real. I finally whispered, "Thank you. I really needed to hear that." Jimmy nodded, but the emotion in his eyes told me the words affected him just as deeply as they affected me. The audience wasn't breathing. You could feel the weight of the moment, not just as entertainment, not as a segment of a TV show, but as a human connection that went beyond fame and cameras and image. In that instant, we weren't a global idol and a world famous host. We were just two people trying to understand the world and survive it. But none of us were prepared for what happened next, the moment that would take the interview to another emotional level and make the entire Tonight Show studio erupt in silence all over again. That moment is what changed everything, not only for me, but for Jimmy too. And the world would soon witness it on live television. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It wasn't easy for me to share all of this, and honestly, a part of me was scared. I was afraid people might misunderstand me or think I was being dramatic or weak or ungrateful. But if you're here listening to these last words, it means you cared enough to hear my heart, and that means more than I can ever explain. I realized something after that night on The Tonight Show. For years, I thought I had to hide my pain to protect the people I love. I thought keeping everything inside would make me stronger. But maybe true strength isn't pretending. Thank you for listening to me not as V from BTS, but as Taehyung, a person who is still learning, still growing, still healing. Thank you for giving me space to be honest. Thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable. And thank you for reminding me that there are people who care even when I don't always see them. I'm sending you comfort, warmth, and love. Until we meet again, this was Taehyung. Thank you for listening.